August 1945. A schoolhouse outside Augsburg in the American zone of occupied Bavaria. In a classroom turned holding cell sat an SS colonel with hours to live and a brown leather law book open on the table in front of him. And he was using it to prove that the murder of hundreds of people had been perfectly legal. He was a doctor of law. He was very good. And General George Patton got in a car and drove an hour through the rubble to tell him, face to face, exactly why he was wrong. No order sent him. The man would hang either way. Patton went anyway. That law book did not belong in a war. Brown leather, German. The spine cracked from use. It belonged to the man waiting in that room, and he had asked for it by title. His name in this account I keep as it appears in the holding facility ledger, because the man it belongs to spent his last free breath insisting that everything he had done was written down, was authorized, was legal. And a name is the smallest debt the record can pay. SS Obersturmbannführer Albrecht Vogel, 41 years old, a doctor of law from the University of Heidelberg, class of 1933, and the commander for 18 months of a mobile killing detachment that had worked its way east through Lithuania and Belarus behind the advancing army. I should say plainly, here at the start, what this story is and is not. Vogel is a composite, drawn from several of the legally trained Einsatzgruppen officers the American and later the Nuremberg investigators questioned in that first summer of peace, men whose interrogation transcripts I have read more than once. The room is a real kind of room. The argument he made is one that was made, in those words and worse, by men exactly like him. The general who came to hear it is documented. Where the record is thin, I will tell you so. Because the thing about Vogel, the thing that separated him from the snarling caricature most people carry in their heads, was that he did not snarl. He reasoned. He had reasoned his way into the work, and now, in custody, he was reasoning his way through it, and he was very good at it, because reasoning was his trade. When the American interrogators first sat across from him in July, they expected one of two things. They expected denial. I knew nothing. I was elsewhere. The records lie. Or they expected the other thing, the thing they had grown used to, the thing 1,000 men in 1,000 cells were saying that summer. I was a soldier. I followed orders. What else is a soldier to do? Vogel gave them neither. Vogel gave them a lecture. He did not deny the killings. He confirmed them calmly, with the precision of a man correcting a clerk's arithmetic. He pointed out where the survivor testimony had inflated a figure and where it had understated one. He explained the chain of authorization above him, decree by decree, the way a tax attorney explains why a deduction is permitted. The jurisdiction decree of 1941 that removed his men from the reach of ordinary military courts. The directive that defined certain categories of persons as security threats by their existence alone. He cited them by number. He had been a lawyer before he was a killer, and he had never stopped being a lawyer. To Vogel, the entire enterprise had been lawful, not in some twisted private sense, but lawful under the actual written statutes of the state he served. And a state, he maintained, is the only thing on earth that can say what law is. That was his defense, not innocence, legality. He had broken no law because the law had been rewritten to permit precisely what he did, by the only authority entitled to rewrite it. I have sat with that argument for a long time. It is worse than the soldier's excuse, and it is worse for a specific reason. The soldier who says I followed orders is at least conceding that the orders might have been wrong. He is hiding behind someone else's wrongdoing. Vogel conceded nothing. He claimed there had been no wrongdoing at all, only a sovereign state exercising its sovereign right to define crime out of existence. He was not asking for mercy. He was asking to be acquitted by the dictionary. And here's the part the interrogators could not get past. Within the closed world of the documents, he was not entirely wrong. The decrees existed. The signatures were real. The architecture of permission was, as a matter of paper, sound. To answer him, you could not simply point to the law. You had to answer a deeper question, one that no statute can settle and that men have argued over since long before there was a right to abuse it. What is law actually for? And is there anything above it that a state cannot reach? That was the question waiting in the classroom outside Augsburg. And on the 1st of August, it found its way to the desk of the military governor of Bavaria. George Patton had been governor for nearly 3 months by then. The job did not suit him, and he knew it did not suit him, and the diary from that summer says as much in his own restless hand. He was a field commander running a filing cabinet. He spent his days on denazification quotas and coal allocations and the reopening of schools, and he was, by every account of the men around him, going slowly out of his mind with the smallness of it. A war crimes liaison officer brought him the Vogel summary on the morning of August 1st. It was not strictly Patton's business. The case belonged to the War Crimes Branch, headed for the Army's own tribunals at Dachau later that year. The officer brought it anyway because something in the transcript had struck him as the kind of thing the general would want to see, and because the general had let it be known that he wanted to see the things other men decided he shouldn't. If you have come this far into the channel for the confrontations that happen at the closing edge of the war, the ones that turn on a single moral question, told the way the men who stood in the room remembered them, the subscribe button below is how you tell me to keep finding them. That is all I will ask. Patton read the summary at his desk. His chief of staff, General Hobart Gay, was in the outer office. Gay's recollection of that morning, given to a historian years afterward, is one of the threads I trust most in this account, and I will lean on it. Patton read it once. He did not react. He read it again. The second time, Gay said, he stopped about 2/3 of the way down a page and went still. Not the stillness of a man thinking, but the stillness of a man who has hit something. He set the pages down, he picked them up, he read the same passage a third time. The passage, Gay believed, was the one where Vogel was quoted directly. Not the body counts. Patton had seen body counts. He had walked into Ordruff in April and stood over the dead, and in the days after, the burghers of the town were marched through it to look. The thing that stopped him was a single line of Vogel's reasoning, set down in the interrogator's flat transcription. The line was, in substance, I committed no crime, because under the law of my state, no crime occurred, and no court of yours has jurisdiction over an act my state declared lawful. Patton put the pages flat on the desk and was quiet for a long time. Then he said one thing. Gay remembered it precisely, because it was so unlike the way the general usually spoke. No profanity in it, no heat. He said, he thinks the law belongs to whoever holds the pen. Then, after a moment, where is he? Gay told him, the schoolhouse outside Augsburg, less than an hour by car. Gay also, to his credit, tried to talk him out of it. There was no need. The case was moving on its own track. It would reach a courtroom in the fall, whether the governor visited the prisoner or not. And a 4-star general turning up unannounced to argue jurisprudence with an SS colonel in a requisitioned classroom was, Gay pointed out, precisely the sort of thing that produced questions no one wanted to answer. The war was over. Patton had enemies in Washington who were counting his missteps. This would be a misstep. Patton heard all of it. Then he said the thing Gay carried for the rest of his life. I have spent 30 years putting men in the ground for their country and burying them when it went wrong. I have never once been able to tell myself it was legal that made it right. This man is about to find out the difference, and I would rather he find it out from me than from a rope, because a rope can't explain itself. He stood. He told Gay to have the car brought around and to bring no escort beyond the driver and one aide. He said he did not want it written up, did not want it logged, did not want it to be anything other than 2 men in a room. The drive south took the better part of an hour, through a Bavaria still half rubble in the towns and untouched in the fields between them. The strange double country that occupied Germany was that summer, ruin and harvest side by side. Patton said almost nothing in the car. The aide, in an account given much later, remembered only that the general had brought the transcript with him, folded into his jacket, and that twice on the road he took it out and read the same page again, and twice folded it back. They reached the schoolhouse a little after 4 in the afternoon. The light, the aide said, was coming in low and yellow through the tall classroom windows, the kind of light that makes even a holding facility look briefly like the school it had been. The duty officer met them at the door with no idea who was coming and went white when he saw. There had been no notice, no preparation. Patton waved off the man's stammered offer to assemble a guard. He asked one question, "Where are you keeping him?" and was told, "The far classroom, the one with the table, the one where the prisoner had asked for his law book and, for reasons no one had quite been able to refuse, been given it." Patton walked the corridor alone except for the aide. The floor was old wood, and his boots made the sound boots make in an empty school. At the last door, he stopped. Through the small glass panes set in it, he could see the back of a man's head and a brown leather book open on a table, and a hand turning a page without hurry, the way a man turns a page when he has all the time in the world and intends to spend it being right. Patton put his hand on the door. The door opened inward, and for a moment, nothing happened at all. Vogel did not stand. He did not turn quickly. He finished the line he was reading, or gave the impression of finishing it, which, with a man like Vogel, is not the same thing and is meant not to be, and only then did he raise his head and look at the American filling the doorway. There was no fear in the look. There was no defiance either, which is what the duty officer in the corridor had half expected. What the aide saw, watching from the threshold, was something closer to professional interest. The man on the chair was appraising the man in the door the way a senior counsel appraises an opposing advocate who has just entered the room ahead of schedule. Patton stepped in. He told the aide to wait outside and pull the door to, but not shut it. The aide did. Through the gap he could hear, and so the exchange that follows survives in his account, taken down decades later, set against what Vogel himself said under interrogation in the weeks before and after. The two records do not contradict each other. They are thin in different places, and where they are thin, I will say so. For a while, Patton said nothing. He crossed to the table. There was a second chair, a child's chair really, too low for him, and he ignored it. And he stood and looked down at the open law book, the way he had looked at the dead at Ordruff. Total attention. No expression a witness could name. "That's yours," Patton said finally. It was not a question. "It is. You asked for it." "I did." Vogel's English was good, better than good, careful, lawyerly, each consonant set down in its place. He had taken part of his legal training in the years when Heidelberg still sent its better students abroad. A man should be permitted his tools. Tools for what? You're not arguing a case. You've already lost it. You just don't seem to have noticed. Something moved at the corner of Vogel's mouth. Not a smile. The acknowledgement of a point. "On the contrary, General, I have noticed precisely. I am going to be hanged. I have known that since the spring. I have made my peace with the rope." He laid one hand flat on the open page, almost tenderly. "What I have not made my peace with, what I will not make my peace with, is the idea that I am to be hanged as a criminal. I am to be hanged as a loser. Those are different things, and the difference is the only thing I have left, and I intend to keep it." There it is. I want to stop on that sentence because it is the whole of him, and because it is the sentence that, in one form or another, real men in real rooms actually said that summer. I am to be hanged as a loser, not a criminal. He was not pleading. He was litigating his own legacy, in advance, against history. Patton pulled the transcript from his jacket. He did not unfold it. He held it. "You told the interrogators you broke no law." "I told them the truth. I broke no law." Vogel said it the way you would state your own date of birth. "Every action my detachment took was authorized under the standing decrees of the German state. The jurisdiction order removed our conduct from the reach of the ordinary courts-martial. The security directives defined the categories. I did not write those instruments. I applied them. I applied them carefully. More carefully, I will tell you, than most. I kept records when others burned theirs. I reported accurately when others inflated. If the law of a state is the will of that state set down in form, then I obeyed the law of my state to the letter, and a man cannot be a criminal for obeying the law. You may hang me for losing the war. You cannot, in logic, hang me for keeping it." Patton listened to all of it. He did not interrupt. That, the aide said, was the part that unsettled him in the retelling. The general who interrupted everyone, who finished other men's sentences out of sheer impatience, stood and let the SS colonel build the whole structure, brick by brick, and said nothing until it was finished. Then Patton said, "That's a good argument." Vogel blinked. "I mean it. That's a good argument. It's better than the one your friends down the hall are using. They say they didn't know. You're smarter than that. You knew everything. You kept the books, and you found the one defense that doesn't require you to lie about a single fact. You're not lying to me. You're telling me the exact truth and asking it to save you. Patton set the folded transcript on the table next to the law book. 2 documents, side by side. Now, I'm going to tell you why it doesn't. I have read the aide's account of what came next more times than I can count. It has not aged out of my memory. It has only sharpened. And I've come to believe that the reason Patton did not simply pronounce the man wrong, the reason he did something stranger and harder, is that he understood the argument was not beaten by being contradicted. It had to be taken somewhere it could not follow. So he did not argue jurisprudence back at the jurist. He reached across the table, turned the transcript so it faced Vogel, and opened it to a page he had clearly marked. You kept accurate records, Patton said. You said so. Let's use them. This is your own report. Your signature is on the bottom, October 1941. He put one finger on a line. Read it to me. Vogel looked at the page. For the first time, something in him hesitated, a half second, no more, but the aide caught it. Then the lawyer reasserted himself, and he read, in the flat, even voice of a man reading a balance sheet. The line gave a place, a date, a category of persons, and a number. The number was in the hundreds. You wrote that, Patton said. I wrote that. Now I'm going to tell you what it doesn't say, because your records were accurate, but they were not complete. And the part they leave out is the part I came here about. Patton drew the second chair around with his boot, the child's chair, and against all dignity he sat in it, so that he was nearly level with the seated man close. There was a school teacher in that place. The investigators have her name now. The survivors gave it. She taught the small children, the ones too young for the fields. When your men came, she was told to bring the children out to the square. She understood before the others did what bringing them out meant. She had perhaps 2 minutes, and in those 2 minutes, she did the only thing left to her, which was to tell the children they were going on a long walk, and that they should hold hands and not be afraid. And she went out the door first so they would follow her and not see the men with the rifles until the last possible moment. Your number counts her. Your number counts every one of them. One line, a category, a place, a date, and a figure in the hundreds. That is what your accurate record looks like from the inside of the 2 minutes she had. The classroom was very quiet. Through the windows, the aide said, you could hear birds in the schoolyard, ordinary and obscene. I tell you that, Patton went on, not to make you feel it. I don't believe you can. I've stopped believing certain men can, and I think you may be one of them, and I am not interested in your feelings either way. I tell you that because your defense rests on the word law, and I want you to look at the smallest unit your law was made of, and I want you to say the word over that. There was a law. The teacher knew there was a law, the way a rabbit knows there's a fox. The law said the children in that square were a category. You applied it carefully, more carefully than most. You said so yourself. Vogel had stopped reading the page. He was looking at the wall now, somewhere above Patton's head, and his hand had come off the law book. I am not, he said at last, and his voice was still controlled, but the consonants had lost a little of their precision. Responsible for the wisdom of the law, only for its faithful execution. That is the entire principle of a... I know the principle, Patton said. I've spent 30 years inside a chain of command. I have signed orders that killed my own men. I have sent boys up a hill knowing a quarter of them wouldn't come down because the order was lawful, and the war was real, and the hill had to be taken. Don't lecture me on faithful execution. I know more about it than you ever will, because I had to do it to people I loved. He leaned in. Which is exactly why I am the wrong man to bring your argument to. You want a philosopher. You'd do better with a philosopher. What you've got is a man who has stood where the order lands. And I am telling you that there is a line, and you crossed it, and you know precisely where it is because you're a lawyer. And a lawyer always knows where the line is. That's what makes him a lawyer. For a long moment, Vogel said nothing. When he spoke again, it was not an argument. It was, the aide thought, the first thing the man had said in the whole exchange that he had not prepared in advance. And if there is no court above the state that can name the line, if the only courts are the ones the victors convene the morning after... Patton stood up out of the child's chair. He stood the way a tall man stands when he has decided something. Then I'll name it myself, he said, right now, in this room, with no court and no robe and no statue to back me. The way one man names a thing to another man before it's too late to say it out loud. Sit there. I'm not finished. What Patton said then was not a speech in the way he gave speeches to assembled men. There was no audience, no profanity to land a laugh, none of the theater he used in front of a division. The aide said it came out low and even and almost slow, the voice of a man laying something down piece by piece, because he means each piece to stay where it's put. You asked me a question, Patton began. A real one. The first real one you've asked. You said, if there's no court above the state, then who names the line? I'm going to answer it, and then I'm going to leave, and you can spend what's left of your life deciding whether I was a fool. You've spent your career believing that law comes down, that it descends, from the state, from the pen, from whoever holds the authority to write. The state speaks and the thing it says becomes law, and the law makes the act clean, top to bottom. That's the only direction you can see. I'm going to tell you that you have it upside down. The law you're holding in that book, the real law, not the decrees you've been hiding behind, it doesn't come down, it comes up. It comes up out of the oldest thing there is, which is one human being looking at another and recognizing him. A man who has buried his own dead knows the weight of a single life because he's carried it. A mother knows it. That teacher knew it, in the 2 minutes she had, better than every jurist in Heidelberg put together. She knew that a child's life is not a category, and she spent her last breath on it. That knowledge is the floor under every law worth the name. The statutes are supposed to be built up out of it, like a house on bedrock. When they are, they hold. When the house forgets the rock it stands on, when a state writes a decree that says the bedrock isn't there, that some lives don't carry weight, that a category can be emptied like a ledger, then what you've got isn't law. It's a man with a pen drawing a line around the people he's already decided to kill and calling the line legal so he can sleep. You did your work carefully, I believe you. You kept honest books of a dishonest thing. And that's the worst of it, because it means you